Yeah, very true. Grass is not always greener on the other side. So we get to see Nuego, even in her childlessness, she longed so much to have a child of her own and even went ahead and breastfed her co-wife's baby just to feel how it was to be a mother. But now that she's a mother, what do we see? She hardly feels those so-called joys of motherhood. And underneath all of this, too, we get to see that motif of the lonely and suffering old mother, because that's what Nuego practically becomes at the end of the novel, upon all of her efforts to enjoy motherhood. So her death is also a very shameful one. She dies all alone by the roadside as if she had no children. So, the values that came by in the country had changed so many things that even a woman like her who had 7 children could die like a barren woman. So, like, even though her second burial becomes the noisiest Ibuza had ever seen, uh, practically, it didn't mean much because her children would have done better. Like, they could have given her a better life, the most befitting life, that is, when she was alive. So, and behind all of this, we get to see that this title also, it critiques the oppressive customs and traditions that marginalize women. The those patriarchal mores and patriarchal, tendencies that have made the African woman, or just practically made women to be, like second class citizens. So, in that note, this title has clearly been able to, be like that scathing attack on these oppressive customs, because, the what, they first of all, uh, they make the woman, first of all, the woman internalizes the patriarchy. So the woman will believe that it's okay for them to be treated as second class citizen at the bottom of the hierarchy where the men are at the top. So, they will just, yeah, do, let just live their everyday life thinking that that is the right way. So, these oppressive customs, once they do that, that is how, it turns into a vicious cycle. So, the woman will live their life as second class citizen all through. And, you know also, like with colonialism, we can see that, systems were changed, and, life, the urban life was now the in thing. Go ahead to move to Lagos. And, so with that, we can also get to understand that, it also contributed to, her not enjoying the joys of motherhood, because, things had already changed. This change that came about, it just messed up a lot of things that were not the norm, like before, the pre-colonial period. So, I'm going to explain deeper into this whole idea of the joys of motherhood. We're just done with the title. So right now I'm going to talk about, the joys of motherhood, not as a title though, but just as a, as the phrase that it is, the joys of motherhood. So, I discovered something interesting, that in this word motherhood, what we can do is just, put a bracket for the M, and then the other words on the other side, between, you put a one bracket on the one side of M and another bracket on the other side of M, separating it with O at the other words. So which word comes if you remove M from motherhood? It is authorhood. So, first and foremost, motherhood is the state of being a mother. Before we even go back to, where I'm going to bring about that idea of authorhood coming in. So, universally, it's usually assumed to be all joyous and satisfactory. The society has made it so clear that being a mother is the epitome of a woman's life. So, it's one experience that every woman is expected to go through. Yeah, but sometimes it's subtle, like, but deep down you just know, like, there's that particular age when you reach as a woman, everybody will be asking, where's her baby, where's her child? Like, if you're married, they'll be asking, like, you married with no kids, stuff like that. So they'll always expect a woman to have a child. So, we're also supposed to understand that the African mother has been the most honored female character in African creative writing. Right from, Chinua Achebe in Things Fall Apart. A woman has been depicted as the paragon of love, strength, and affection. So, Chinua, he goes ahead in his book Things Fall Apart, a very famous novel that is. He holds the African mother as a supreme symbol. He points out that whenever a man, is in trouble or misfortune comes or sorrow comes, what does he do? He finds refuge in his motherland. So, he establishes that mother image as a representation of power and respect. And also, there's this famous Yoruba proverb that I got to learn from another book by another Nigerian author, Ayobami Adebayo, and the proverb goes like this: "There is no God like a mother." So that is one proverb that eulogizes a mother. She's been put up there. She's like a god, and definitely there's no God like her. So this bit, for the most type, I believe it reflects like to traditional African societies, conventions, and not just, Igbo, Yoruba, or Nigerian, something of that sort. So, it's also very interesting to note that Buchi, our author of this novel, The Joys of Motherhood, has, she's broken away from the African modes of who a mother is. She has decided to go against convention, in how we fail to see those glorifying images of a mother. Instead, what do we see? We see the flaws in motherhood. We see tears, we see pain, the turmoil, the perfect opposite of joys. So, you also get to see that subtle description of motherhood, the one that I had already mentioned as I began this part, the description of authorhood. Authorhood of a woman which has been camouflaged in the patriarchal definition of motherhood. Motherhood ought to be described in a way, as per my opinion, I believe motherhood ought to be described in a way that it is not, used against women. It is defined in a way that women do not get to be the ones on the losing end. And from what I was able to observe, in this if it's like patriarchal system or just systems that marginalize women or subjugate women, what they do is they start defining things for them. They define womanhood for them, they define motherhood for them. So motherhood, in this sense that Bucci was trying to show us, it was defined from a patriarchal point. It was, in simple terms, defined by a man. So, this definition of motherhood is, this definition of motherhood, what does it do? It is camouflaged, of course, in patriarchal definition, in patriarchal, tendencies. And I just, sat back and thought of it as like, why don't they just remove the M and then it becomes authorhood? Because what are they doing? They're authoring the woman. They're putting her on the other side, They're putting her, far from the center. She has no voice. She's just there to be seen. Bucci, she's able to record, the troubled and the chaotic moments in her mother's life. Notwithstanding, she brings up the issue that is not so commonly talked about, the issue of the childless woman who is struggling with infertility, as well as, mothers who worry about their children. And so, this novel, we can see that it's an exploration of the tension also between tradition and modernity, because we can see Nuego, she's trying her best to fit into this new world. She's straight up from Ibuza, she goes to Lagos. She's not only fitting into, her new life, in Lagos, but she's trying to fit into the new Nigeria. It's not the old Nigeria. Things are changing, fast. The 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 white men have already established their rule, and they're trying to work fast ahead of time, because in the 60s, this whole, independence is going to come about. So, Nuego, she becomes fully conscious of the path that her life has taken. And, that is what, makes her even be able to come with us, not necessarily, like, she's able to try and fit, though it's not easy, but she tries to kind of blend with that new life in Lagos. But we can see that she's really trying, though it wasn't like the life she was used to before. And next, we can also see that in this novel, the economic, sociopolitical, and cultural aspects are contradictory to the ones that we are used to seeing in the works of her contemporaries, like Chinua Achebe and Nwapa Flora, because for her, she, in her book, we can see a lot of turning tides in this new era, because economically we can see that the colonial space has brought with it structural inequalities and cruelties. We can see that the neoliberal capitalism is practiced. Her husband works as a washerman for a white couple, and she also makes a living by selling at the markets. And then we can see that the old communal system has been replaced with this capitalist system, and everyone is now working their best, to scrape together a living as an individual and no more as a community. And also socially, we can see that the old structure that was there of family and kinship ties and all of that, it was broken. And unfortunately, there's nothing to replace it. It's broken and it's done, where people are heading on towards a new dawn or something. So, initially parents were to take good care of their children. Then in the long run, the children take, it would be their turn, so they take care of them in their old age. And that would be the ultimate joy of motherhood. But we see in this system, it has been broken. What happens? We can see. We also get to see that new educational opportunities have been established for African males so they can go abroad and study. So, though, it's presumed that, when somebody goes abroad, that is the ultimate, eradication of poverty and change of social status. We see the contrary with Nuego's son, Oshiaju, because even though he travels to America, Nuego's social status doesn't change, and he does not even communicate with her. So, this new system, this new modern system, has brought with it, such kind of issues, whereby, family and kinship ties are no longer valued. So at the end of the day, what happens? A son, a son decides to, keep that distance from the mother, a mother who has, sacrificed so much for her to even be wherever he is. So we also get to note that the colonial states, despite having initiated all of these issues, they do not even care to provide a social safety net, like in the forms of proper health care or home for the aged, financial assistance that the old people can depend on. So you see, this colonial system has already created this big problem ahead. But the country is also moving ahead, you see. But it's moving ahead towards independence, but things are just getting worse. So one may ask, like, they're headed somewhere, but behind them, systems have already been broken, and it's like the future is so bleak, as they head towards, the 60s, or the period where they get their independence, they'll be like more of forming their new nation on a foundation that isn't that strong because of these new systems that have come up. And also politically, we can see rapid urbanization, which has contributed to new concepts of justice. We can see that the Nigeria that is being depicted right now is a changing one. It's different from how it was like in Ibuza or any other African village prior to colonization. So we can before we could hear of things like banishment, for people who had committed some crime. You could be banished for a couple of years and then you come back. But now with this new system in Lagos, we see Naife. He's tried and imprisoned for assaulting Aremu's father. And you know what? It comes with a consequence. He loses part of his gratuity for the crime. So in all of this, we get to understand that there's a new form of justice, which is incarceration. And also underneath that, we get to see that that tinge of corruption, it's cropping up in this new this new system that is coming up, this city life, this urbanization, this modern life. You see, the lawyer, what he does, instead of Naife spending 5 years in prison, he tries and he does some things, he just does some dubious stuff there, so that they allow him to just spend three months in prison, and then after that he can hide and just go to the city, so that the family of Aremu's father don't get to see him. So that's also like corruption that was coming up at that point. And Bucci, in her special way of presenting to us this beautiful story. She does not, dwell on the perfections of the mother. What she does is describe to us, this mother in a variety of ways, her flaws and all of that. When she sacrifices, when she fights for her children's welfare, when she protects them, when she's correcting them, like sometimes when she decides to revolt against these traditional customs, when she finally gets that wake up call at the end of the novel, she's like, no, I am no longer going to like this life, like what was it worth at the end of the day? Like the men have really stepped on us, they've really made us look like we're some doormats. She realizes that at the end of the novel that if we don't stand up, we are going to make these men continue being bosses of us. And just like Flora Wampa in Efuru, who also focuses on women's lives in both positive and negative aspects, which has been able to present to us that aspect very, very well. And also there are some essential styles and techniques that have been used in the novel, and the first one being Bildungsroman. So, a Bildungsroman, it's a novel that's, loosely translated from its, Germanic etymology. It's a formation novel, and it's a novel that shows the psychological and moral growth of an author from adolescent times up till maturation. So it's a coming of age novel. And here, character change is very important, with those experiences someone goes through that end up shaping what they believe. And, as they try to find that meaningful existence in that society which they find themselves in. So, this, joys of motherhood, when you put it side to side with Butch's own life, you find out that, with her own life, she was a young girl who was on the verge of missing out on education, but she gets a chance to study and then matures and gets married and then goes ahead and lives, in the diaspora, where she experiences a different life. She discovers herself and her place in the society, So, aside from being black in the UK, she suffers, with all those forms of discrimination that could be, that a black person can face. She also, gets to, she struggles so much, as an African woman from a patriarchal society. Thus, she experiences double marginalization. So, we get to understand that her dreams were almost stifled by an abusive husband who tore her first manuscript. He told her would have been first book, that is, which later on went to be her third book, that is The Bride Price. And then she went ahead to divorce him and then live her life as a single mother, struggling to take care of her 5 children. So we can say that this, as Butch's own personal life, is like, she's like on a journey, can see that she's on a journey of discovery. She struggles for that identity within the context of a defined social order. She struggles to identify herself, as a Black woman living in the UK during those times, in the 60s and the 70s. So, and you see the novel, The Joys of Motherhood too, it covers the span of 25 years of Nwego's personal development from the time she is newly married to her old age. So from there, she grows from that staunch traditionalist to that feminist, after discovering that motherhood has not brought all that fulfillment she thought. So, she discovers also that those revered Ibuza customs were greatly flawed. So, her mind is developed, and her character also matures. And, her character, it grows as she, matures in her life, and the roles that her life take. And I can say for sure that Bucci personally identifies with the new. Another important aspect that we can see with the styles that Bucci has been able to use in her novel are flashback, languages, and character introspection. So we can see that she uses flashback to tell crucial information important in the development of the plot. We get to see that transition of Nigeria from a communal traditional life to a more capitalistic modern life. So she takes us back to the beginning of the 20th century until the time that the novel is set. And, with languages also, we can see that she's very careful, and she's carefully selective and very creative, because she uses that, as she describes her characters in the environment in a very creative way, because, she selects the manner of speech that they use. So like in dialogue, for example, in the urban city of Lagos, she's able to, present them speaking in Pidgin English. Pidgin English is the language of the streets, and, she doesn't, present them to us as speaking, English like Englishmen, but rather Pidgin English. So with that imagery, we're able to see, the time and space that was there at that time. And, most African writers, they usually tend to be objective when they approach their characters. But Bucci, with her, she tries her best to, probe the minds of her characters and gives us that clear picture of the psychological forces that drive their actions. And through that, we are able to get right inside our protagonist, Nwego's subconscious and into her thoughts, because, we're able to, listen to her, be in her shoes when we actually hear whatever it is that she speaks, and not from a position that is out there. And also, a very salient topic of discussion in this novel is patriarchy. So, patriarchy is that system by which in a society, men, they hold the power and women are excluded from it. So, the major roles that women are exempted from are like political leadership, the control of the economy, the social and moral privileges. They are all dominated by men. This is the very basis of male hegemony. So, those ideas that have been set by the society, they justify and explain why men are to behave the way they behave in the society. And, so it's important to also realize that there's some tension or that controversy that has come about with this topic of patriarchy, because some sociologists, they usually argue that, this patriarchy thing is a social product, and thus they get to focus on how the gender roles in a society affect this power differential between men and women. But in the pre-colonial African communities, like for example the Igbo, people are not so sure if this ideology existed before, and just as I've said, it has sparked a lot of controversy and literary debates. So there's some writers like Amata Ido of Ghana and Flora Up of Nigeria. They insisted that the authoring and discrimination of women and subordination of women too by men was ushered in by the European imperialists. But and a very renowned Nigerian poet, anthropologist, and essayist, Ifeamadi Ume, she gives a very sagacious description of that. by supporting that, with the introduction of Christianity and, Western and Victorian ideologies, women then took that secondary position, in the fields of education, religion, and stuff like that. So, she thus gives us that understanding of, how this patriarchy came to be. So there's that contention. Some people think patriarchy was already in Africa even before the imperialists came. Some say that it is the imperialists that brought it. So, this same masculinization, it's occurred also in, political representation in the local government systems throughout Igbo land. Because with Buchi, we can see that, she gives us that understanding of the transition that happened in Igbo land. So, Buchi, for her, she maintains that the African woman was traditionally subordinated to sexist culture almost. So she's on that part of the controversy where people believe that patriarchy was there even before the imperialists came. So, it doesn't matter, whether it was a white man who brought it or not. These male hegemonial elements that we see in Africa, one clear thing is that, colonialism aggravated the situation. It made it worse, because they came up with this lopsided system where men, they received good education, and then women would just be there to be, their domestic helps, and they won't do, they won't engage in professional jobs. So, with time, there was that reinforcement of that whole system that had started with the introduction of cash economy. So in the novel, we can get a glimpse of that, the social, economic, and political stake of a woman in a patriarchal society has been unearthed, through the anxieties and frustrations that she faces. So, in the novel, we can get the ramification of that ideology of patriarchy that had crept into the mind of the African and aggravated their old beliefs. So, for example, with Honor, the mother of Nuego and wife of Wokocha Abadi, we can see that her position inherently is that of a male daughter. Remember, the father wanted her to give birth to a son because he didn't have a son, so that he could, own that son, the son could be able to, hold his name and be like his son. So, so because her father didn't have male children, that is, so she was required to beget her son who would carry his name. And this shows us that the society had already been socialized at that point to believe that a male child is better than a female child, and it is them who carry the family name. So, even when Honor dies, she feels very bad. She cries for many days, especially because she was unable to give her father, the son that he had wanted. Remember, Honor gave birth to Nuego, who wasn't, a male child. So, she continues to stay in her father's house, and, she doesn't go and get married to, her lover, Abadi, because of how she felt. The father had refused her, the father had dictated how she was going to live. So, this shows the egoistic nature of the father, because it leads her into, this situation where she didn't get to do what she desired most, which was to marry Abadi. And, we can say that these were culturally determined oppressions, they were already there in the culture, and they barred her from marrying her lover. So, she had yearned for a family of her own, we are told that, but, she was torn between her father's wish and that one of hers, and because of patriarchy, she got to choose her father's wish. So we can also see that with Nuego's childlessness and the turmoil that she goes through at that particular time, we can attribute it to patriarchy, because we see the first husband, Amatoku, telling her to move to a nearby hut, that he cannot wait forever for her to conceive, yet he was the first son, So she faces a lot of challenges. She's, frustrated and stressed out because she's unable to conceive. And why? Because of those patriarchal tendencies. So, Amatoku also dominated over Nuego so much. We can see him ordering her around in the farm like she's just some farm help. And, he doesn't give her that chance to, express herself, even on one occasion tells her that he's a very busy man and he's not going to waste his seeds on an infertile woman. So, this patriarchal system and patriarchal ideals, they still, their own father, we can also see them that, it's this same patriarchy that makes women who are childless feel bad when they're barren, but in the long run, even when they finally give birth, the struggle does not end there, because women are now like slaves in this patriarchal system. The society is still on their neck, if the child is not male. Like, for example, Noego, she gave birth to twins at a particular time, twin female, children, and the husband wasn't happy with her, and she even blamed herself, and she felt very bad. So, that, has just, that is just a reflection of how patriarchal the society was. They did not find female children. So, male children were seen as that symbol of honor, status, maintenance of lineage, and etc. So, even when Adaku and Nuego, they have that fight, what happens is that Wankuso comes and rules in favor of Nuego instead of Adaku, because Adaku doesn't have any sons and Nuego has. And also there's that role of a senior wife in the Igbo culture. We can see that it's a clear reflection of patriarchy. The senior wives, they definitely feel bad deep down, but they're unable to say so. They're given that position as some honorable title, but they just pretend to be happily serving it. They're expected to be mature. They behave so much with equanimity and poise, and they're expected to guide those other younger wives. But they've been silenced because they do not complain no matter what. So like we are told that when Naife, he brings Adaku as a new wife. He inherited her from the late brother. So he brings Adaku home, and he has sex with her right inside the same room where Nuego and her children are sleeping. But Nuego doesn't complain. She doesn't complain because she's a senior wife, and that position has made her, she's like a slave. She cannot speak her mind. She cannot even complain if something is bothering her, because she's being, referred to as the senior wife. And another aspect of patriarchy is that it blames women for all the wrongs that go on in the family. We can see that when, Ngozi, Nuego's firstborn son, dies, Naife blames her. And then even when she decides to commit suicide at the Kata Bridge, Nwakuso, comes there and, starts probing her, after saving her, starts asking her, like, who are you leaving your son for? Your son who is just some few weeks old. What about your father? It's more like she doesn't even have a right over her own life. Her life belongs to the male people in her life. So we can also see that even later on, as the novel continues, we get to see that this same Luego, she's being blamed for Naife's incarceration, and all the misfortunes that follow after, even the Oulum family, they decide to, ostracize her, and she's never allowed to go back to the husband's place, and she goes to live with her younger children at her father's home. So that was a very good, angle to look at how patriarchy had really, it had really affected the lives of the women in that society. And also, another aspect of patriarchy is that women, we can say that some women, like Nuego, for example, initially, she had internalized this patriarchy and had decided to think in line with it without even questioning. So she had that rough idea of who a man is and who a woman is. So to her, the man is the head and holds all the power, then the woman is subordinate. So she does all those housework, cooking, washing, and everything. So when she sees Naife, working for the Mias, as a washerman, she feels like Naife is less a man, he's more like a woman. Like, he considers Naife as weak. So that is what patriarchy does. It makes even women think that men are superior, and then they have specific occupation that they can do, and women also have the specific occupations that they can do according to how they're viewed as weak. So also another aspect with patriarchy is that it demands chastity from women and not men. We can see that Nuego, when she gets married to Amatoku, her first husband, the father boasts so much about how the daughter was found to be intact, how she was found to be a virgin. But, the society doesn't get to probe men whether they're virgins or not, so that is very patriarchal. And another aspect is when a woman is not allowed to have any affair outside the marriage, but we can see the men, they're marrying wives, they're inheriting wives, they're having mistresses, but women are not allowed. So that's another patriarchal tendency. And another important aspect that we looked at in this novel is the consciousness and the birth. Is consciousness and the birth of feminism. So we understand that our psyche is not in totality, so it's individual experiences that help us to navigate our own struggles too when we see other people struggling. So in this in the society, when there are oppressive systems and stuff like that, we get to understand them from a better perspective if we are able to learn from other people and how they were able to find their way around all those issues. So it is social existence that determines consciousness. Having experienced or having lived or having seen somebody experience it, what determines how you're now going to react, how you're now going to start thinking differently. That consciousness. So we can see that the ironies and cruelties that Naga experienced in her life forced her to move from that collective consciousness to individual consciousness. So we can say that, she became a feminist in the long run, because feminism is that collection of movements that struggle for women's rights. So it focuses on gender as the basis of the oppression, and then feminists attempt to establish equal rights for women, politically, economically, socially, and personally. So Nwego, she comes to terms with colonialism and its dynamics. Then she finally comes to terms with herself. Now she finds, herself in that new order of female emancipation. She now wants to break free from all those patriarchal, things that she believed, those patriarchal ideologies that she believed before. So she searches for an abundant, self-fulfilling life. So she divorces herself, from all those traditional African concepts that disenfranchise women, and she learns of the importance of having a separate identity from that of being a wife or a mother. Then we can also see that Adaku is a very, she's a very good model and for feminism, like in this book, because we can see that her character initially is contrasted with that of Nwego. She's very radical, unlike Nwego, who is subservient. But then we can see that she refused also to give Naife food until he increases their food allowance. So she continues the struggle for equality for her. She continues it more and more through, like, as the novel continues. We can see that finally she walks out on her husband to find a better life for her daughters and herself. She then decides to educate the children, and something that was not the norm, because even Nwego did not educate hers. So she does this believing fully and knowing that education is the only way that can help, a girl or a woman to break free from all of these, all of these, issues that come up because of patriarchy and all these issues of marginalization. So, even though she's considered a failure and orphaned simply because she did not give birth to sons, she changes that narrative, and she develops consciousness and seeks her own fulfillment. So Nwego also, once she realizes that she's a second-class citizen by being a woman, what she does is, she becomes conscious of these social constraints that society has put against women. She realizes that she's a prisoner of her own flesh and blood. She thus questions the male set standards that made her think of herself as unworthy without a child and gave no hope for the daughters. She says that, women, they need to change this narrative, or else they'll still continue to be, the one who built this world that is a man's world, So both Nwego and Adaku, they have been able to envision authentic selfhood and how to break from the oppression of women.
Patriarchy as a major concern in this novel. So patriarchy can be referred to as a system by means of society which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. Some great philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, Hippocrates are some of the people who laid the foundation through which patriarchy was built. This is clearly depicted through their writings, ideas, and arguments that women are viewed. This is clearly depicted through their writings, ideas, and arguments that women were viewed in ancient days as inferior to men since birth. And from birth, they were also trained to be subjects to men, and they grew up believing that men had the right to control them. Male dominance in political leadership, control of economy, social and moral privileges has led to male hegemony. Ideas have been set to justify and explain why men behave the way they behave also in a society. In West Africa, writers such as Ama-Ata Aido of Ghana and Flora Nwapa of Nigeria insist that the othering, discrimination, and subordination of women by men was ushered in by Europeans, since there are women who used to live that way. Taking, for example, Igbo land, for the patriarchal representation in the local government was masculinized in that the chiefs, the court clerks, and court messengers in the local community were men. That was during the colonial period. In the novel, the social, economic, and political state of in a patriarchal society has been unearthed through the frustrations and anxieties that they are in and that women face. Taking Honor, for example, she is the mother to the protagonist, Nuego, and a wife to Chief Nkwocha Agbadi. Her position inherently is that of her male daughter, since she was the only child to her father, Obi. And quoting from Amadume, 1987, that gender was not always tied to biological sex, and women will be male too. The essence of this narrative has been sapped. Thus, has been sapped through time, and that is the reason why we are witnessing it in the novel, and that being male daughter has taken a different approach as since it is seen as patriarchal. Since her father did not have any male child, Honor was required to beget a son for him that will have to carry his name. So even when the father died, when Obi died, Honor cried for days. Yeah, since mostly because she was not able to give him the son he wanted, and even after her father's death, she continues to stay in her father's house, despite Agdi persuasion for over 2 years to make her go live with him and stop being a mistress. This is because of the culturally determined oppressions that bar her from marrying, despite the fact that she's in love with Agbadi. It is also the egoistic nature of Obi, the father to honor, that led to the quagmire, which is family rooted to patriarchy. Yeah. Another point is Nuego's childlessness and the turmoil she goes through because of it is deeply attributed to patriarchy. This is because members of the society have an idea that men dominate the social and moral privileges, so the women are therefore seen as the ones who are to be blamed and mocked when they are not able to conceive, and nobody stops for a minute to consider to consider that the man is the one who has a problem to sire children. So it is unfortunate for Nuego, since she internalizes this idea and also believes that it is her fault. And Amatoku, her first husband, goes on to marry another woman and tells Nuego that she should move to a nearby hut as he cannot wait forever to conceive. He cannot wait forever for her to conceive, yet he's the first son, and his people are depending on him for an heir. So Amotoku dominated over Nuego so much, to a point when he treated her as one of the farm helpers. Yeah, he even tells her that he's a busy man and has no time to waste his precious male seed on an infertile woman. Even another point is even when a woman finally bears a child, the struggle does not end there. If the child is a female, the society is on the mother's neck, wanting the mother to give birth to a son, since the male child is a symbol of honor, status, and maintenance of lineage. Taking for example, when Adako and Nuego disagreed in the absence of their husband, kinsman Nwakusur is called in to intervene, and he rules in favor of Nuego simply because he has sons, even though she was on the wrong, and Adaku's position is therefore sidelined because she bear only daughters. In another situation of patriarchal dominance is when the role of the senior wife in the Igbo culture is a clear in the Igbo culture. So the senior wife is seen as an honorable title that women pretend to happily serve. They are expected to act maturely, and they should also guide the younger wives. The society even silences the senior wives in that they are not expected to complain no matter what. That is, even when the husband marries many wives, the senior wife should not complain. When Naife, Nuego's second husband, inherits Adako and brings her home, he has sex with her right in the same room where Nuego and her children used to sleep. Even though this does not please her, she neither protests nor complains, as she is the senior wife. Patriarchy also in the novel blames women for all wrongs that go on in the family. When Ngozi, Nuego's and Naife's first son dies, Naife blames her. she goes ahead to feel bad, that to a point that she wanted to commit suicide at the Carter Bridge, because she feels like she's responsible for their son's death. And later on, she's even blamed for Naife's incarceration and the misfortune that follows, that she is not welcome to his home by his people and is branded as a bad woman. Her husband's people even blame her for not raising her children well, as she spent most of her time in her business. What was she to have done, after all, if her trading that provided for the family most of the time? If anything, her children could have died of malnutrition had she not set up her business. She is left with no option but to go back to her father's village in Ogboli and live there with her children. Since she had expected that this, as she believed, only children belonged to their father. In the same way, patriarchy demands chastity from women and not men. It is women who are expected to be virgins by the time they are married. Nobody bothers. Oku marries Nwego. People are eager to find out if she's a virgin. Her father, Agbadi, later boasts to his friends Idai of his daughter, of how his daughter has been found intact. Even there's a time he also held a celebration and invited members of his community, to celebrate with him, because his daughter was found pure. It is, however, unfair and discriminatory. This is because those women who may be found to be non-virgins had relation with the same men who want to marry virgins, and they are considered to be practicing infidelity. They are judged. They are not even they don't even get married. So absolute fidelity is also demanded from women and not men. A woman is not even allowed to have any affair outside marriage. Yet men are at liberty and can marry more wives and have mistresses. Take Naife, for example. He inherits his brother's widow and also marries a younger wife later on when he gets back from war. Polygamy gets to empower them even more, as they practically own their wives. So Nwego remains faithful to him despite of all this. When Adaku leaves Naife's household to live in a single mother, this is not taken lightly by the society, as they condemn her for her actions, since men are considered as the providers in the society, and women should be subject to men. So when she leaves, this is considered as an abomination. And Nwego herself is a victim of patriarchy, because she internalized it and thinks in line with it without question. She has a rough idea of who a man is and a woman is. To her, a man is the head and holds all power, and women are the subordinates. So thus household duties like cooking looking after children, washing clothes and ironing are not to be done by men, but a woman. If a man happens to do them, it is considered also, the man is considered as weak, just like a woman, and he is seen as a woman. So she therefore thinks Naife is not man enough because he washes and irons the mayor's clothes. That's all I have on patriarchy. Thank you.
Afternoon. I'll be handling consciousness and birth of feminism. The social existence of different characters in the novel is determined by their consciousness, in that the images of a woman that no ego believed initially are in the head and learned, and new consciousness is evoked in her. Feminism refers to a collection of movements that struggles for the rights of women, focusing on gender as a basis of oppression, and their attempts to establish equal rights for women, both economically, financially, and socially. The author uses Adaku, for instance, to bring out the struggles and empowerment of women to fight for what they believed in. Adaku initiates a strike by refusing Naife food until he increases their food allowances. She continues to struggle for equality and ends up walking out on her husband to fight better life for her daughters and herself. This makes her break the traditional norms by educating her daughters, arguing that education was the only way that they could remove them from othered status. Through Adaku, the author encourages African women to be educated in order to save a room for their own, like have a place in the society. Adaku is again considered a failure and was fit in the othered bracket simply because she did not sire sons, but at the end of the novel she chooses to change this notion as she seeks to develop her own consciousness and self-fulfillment. Ego, for instance, realizes her status as a second citizen, being a woman, after Owulum family ostracizes her, making her conscious of the social constraints the society has against women. This makes her realize that she is a prisoner of her own flesh, hence questioning the male set standards that made her feel herself unworthy without a child. Through her, the author shows how the society has preference for boys to girls. That is, for example, when gives birth to a set of twin girls, Naife did not receive the news well, for he is furious that she had given him girls, hence asking her, like, what are these? Like, in real sense, they are just children, but he didn't appreciate. He was just upset that they were just girls. This shows that the society of the Igbo people viewed women as the minority and inferior. This is in contrast when Adaku gives birth to a male child who eventually passed on after some time. Naife is really happy about it because she had given him a male child. The society again dehumanizes women. For instance, when honor is denied sexual pleasures by her lover Abadi, as soon as he attains his own. Abadi, on the other side, wanted her humiliated in her own burning desire. The author criticizes the male authority for treating women as inferior, disrespecting their sexuality and humiliating them. Abadi, for example, disregards his wife for years and spends his time with honor his mistress, making the wives feel like their sexual pleasures are neglected. Another concern is the manner in which Naife impregnates his women. When he leaves for war, he leaves his wife Nu and Adaku pregnant, and on return from the war, he finds that they had given birth to girls. He still impregnates them again and he leaves. And then he goes to the village where he fights his widowed brother, the widow of his brother, and then he leaves the village after he impregnates her. According to the novel, these women may perhaps have wanted to have a say on their bodies and matters of their reproduction, but the society did not give them the right to say. Hence, the author shields the right of polygamous system of oppression in a male-dominated society, with women at the bottom of the hierarchy, subjected to more and more misery. She gives a voice to silent African women, casting light upon women invisibility and oppression in the society. These women are denied a chance to choose whom they love, decide whether or not to have children. Again, the Igbo society made it clear that women had no right over their own life, such that when Nu tries to commit suicide at the bridge, Nwakuso prevents her, but still goes ahead to criticize her, asking a lot of rhetoric questions on why she wanted to take a life. He asked her if who would take care of her son, her husband, her father after her death, and he viewed the suicide mission as a shame to womanhood, depicting that women were considered men's property and they had no right to take their own lives. Though the novel is viewed as a feminist book, Bushi, through Joys of Motherhood, does not consider herself a feminist and avoids being called a Western feminist, hence maintains her work towards liberating women. Nu's consciousness, coming late at the end of the novel, makes it Joys of Motherhood does not consider herself a feminist and avoids being called a Western feminist, hence maintains her work towards liberating women. Nu's consciousness, coming late at the end of the novel, makes it less feminist. The novel extends the metaphor of enslaved Igbo women programmed by the society to be slaves of their husbands, their sons, their fathers, and the author goes ahead to shed light on the institution of motherhood, where a woman's role as a mother, a second-class citizen, serves for herself. Although Adaku's character is a description of the liberated women, she lives contrary to the expectations of the society by entertaining men. This puts herself on a negative light in that the society finds These liberated women are likely to lose their morality and be promiscuous.
As we conclude, we can all agree that Boucher's main intention was to criticize the African patriarchal hegemony and how it defines motherhood generally, and for that, not devaluating mothering. She uses the nuances of female experiences to come to a general idea of the oppression and marginalization of each and every woman. Coupled with the insiders' colonial system, the institution was being reinforced in a variety of ways. In that, women in the midst of all this were still experiencing an aggravation to their already sorry state. The African woman's struggle to transform into modern way, having the repercussion of these cultural collisions, hints of the idea of the existing tension between traditional and modern beliefs at a time when Nigeria was first coming to terms with modernity.